Welcome to the Perfect Life Awakening Show, hosted by Royce Morales. Royce has been a transformational facilitator, teaching groundbreaking, spiritually based courses for more than 4 decades. She is the author of 3 books about her teachings. Join Royce as she takes you on a journey into how to live your best life and find your true purpose through discovering the origins of subconscious, disempowering notions and releasing them. She talks with experts and inspiring people just like you who learned to trust their intuitive inner wisdom, which led to life-changing shifts. Today, her guests live an empowered existence and are helping change the world to a higher consciousness place based on truth and love. You deserve to awaken to, align with, and embody your true self and live a life filled with love. Transform yourself from triggered to empowered and create your perfect life. Here is your host, Royce Morales.
Hello, welcome to my show. I'm so excited today because I get to talk to somebody who I've spoken to before, Sophia Demas, and since I've spoken to her, she's written another book. But let me tell you about her a little bit here. She's had 3 diverse careers, and I mean diverse. She had a decade in architecture, including working with Buckminster Fuller, who's one of my absolute heroes. She had her own couture fashion business, and she worked as a mental health therapist in private practice. She created a program called Living a Fearless Life, which was helping women, at-risk women, dealing with their self-esteem, especially women in the prison system, formerly homeless women, just an amazing project. And she has told me that she never wanted to write. I feel the same way, but I've written 3 books also. But she authored her first book, which is called The Divine Language of Coincidence, which chronicles the extraordinary, life-changing miracles that she experienced, which literally reconfigured her life. And we talked about that the last time you were on the show. And just to give you a little summary of that book, she discovered that the key to turning a coincidence into a potential miracle is just paying attention to that divine nudging that we get. I get those all the time, and I try not listening, but it never works, so I've given up. Anyway, her most recent book is called Consciousness Beyond Death: True Stories of Signs, Messages, and Timing. And it's all about communicating with dead people, the consciousness of dead people. I hate saying dead people. It sounds so awful. Spirits. The book is filled with really fascinating stories, and they all have the same message. And I don't want to, this is a spoiler alert, but I'm sure those listening to this show probably know this anyway, that when we die, we're simply shedding our bodies and are as conscious as we were prior. So we all want to know this. I don't think there's a person on the planet that isn't curious as to what happens after we die. But what I think is really exciting about what has happened to Sophia recently is that she was asked to give her information to a bunch of scientists because they're now exploring, there's a new scientific field of study called after-death communication. And this is a subject that, as I'm sure you probably know, no scientist ever wanted to touch with a 10-foot pole or a microscope, as the case may be. So I am so excited to hear about all that, but I just want to give a little bit of background about myself because maybe you don't know this. You probably don't know this about me, those of you who are watching this, but several decades ago, I hate to admit how many, I was trained as a channeler, which is a whole long story in and of itself. But when I started getting involved in the realm of communication with spirits, I was terrified. I was absolutely shaking in my boots, as they say. And I thought for sure some weird spirit would come and they would fling things across the room. And, I had that Hollywood image of what it would be like. But honestly, have to admit, I wasn't even sure that I believed in spirits until, of course, I started getting these profound messages and I couldn't deny it. But it took me a long time to really trust that. And then, it became something that I was put on display and all this stuff happened from it. And eventually I decided that I kind of needed to veer away from it because I was getting more higher consciousness messages. I was no longer getting messages from Uncle Harry who was telling you to put air in your tires. I was getting messages about what I was supposed to do and the spiritual teachings that I was supposed to impart. And I just kind of walked away from it. Although I'm still very open and very sensitive to it. I get messages all the time for me and for others. A lot of them are for me. And I've learned to trust that when I get that feeling, I have to listen to it. So, with all of that in mind, I want to welcome Sophia to my show. So glad you're here. I'm sorry about last week with all our technical difficulties, but divine timing, as they say. So I'm so glad you're here. So go ahead.
No, thank you for inviting me.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, when I heard about your book and all the stuff that's happening in the scientific community, I was just blown away. I keep hearing sounds in the background. I don't know if that's the engineer that's making sounds or if there's something.
I'm hearing sounds here too coming
Okay.
through. So can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay, but I'm hearing little clicking sounds.
Yeah, same here.
Anyway, so tell us about your new book and, how did it happen? And give us the whole rundown about that.
Well, you were correct about saying about me not wanting to write. I was told by a medium like 15 years ago that I was going to write a book. And I just told her, I said, I'm sorry, but that's not in the cards, and number one, I had nothing to say. I told her I have nothing to say. And two, I'm a people person. So, I'm not going to sequester myself somewhere and write a book. So, and she just listened to me. And then she said, word for word, she said, Spirit says when she's ready, there are many spirits here to help her and many hands on earth. And that's how it came down. So, so I would tell people about these miracles, and the response was always, oh, well, these things only happen to you. And it was a little annoying, to hear this because I'm not special, and then in 2011, I reconnected with a childhood friend, and I told her my latest miracle, and she says, well, these things only happen to you. And something clicked because of the number of miracles, the number of experiences. And you were so correct to say that the way to turn a coincidence into a miracle is to pay attention, but also incredibly important is to take action, to actually take action. And then you can, and what happens then is this divine, okay, so what I believe is that there's this divine intelligence out there, consciousness, God, whatever you call it, that wants us to be happy and find our true purpose. And so it communicates with us in very, very clever ways, through dreams, through intuition, through meeting somebody and have them say the perfect thing at the right time, and coincidences. So I believe that this divine intelligence puts coincidences in our path. And then once we take action, well, first, of course, you have to recognize it, take action, and then you become a co-creator with this divine intelligence. And then the miracle is presented to you. And by miracle, I mean getting exactly what you need at just the right time, whether it's money, whether it's an idea, whether it's whatever. It comes to you, advice at just the right time. So what happened is when I really saw that was the key, was to recognize it and take action, I decided I wanted to share this. And so I sat down and I wrote all the coincidences and then all of the miracles. And they were just too numerous to cram into one book. So I just intuitively plucked out all the ones that had to do with death. So the first book is basically a memoir. It's basically chronological. The miracles are chronological, except for 2 chapters. So one is titled Please, which is about prayer and asking for what you want. And the other one is Thank You, about gratitude, which I consider to be the highest form of prayer. So that was the first book. And then all of a sudden, here I have this material for a second book. And much of it is communication, after death. But some of them have to do with what happened before a person died. 2 stories are about the being instructed almost against one's will to do something that the dying person was able to get their final wish. Mm. And so what you said about the scientists, I knew that scientists were studying consciousness, but I had no idea that they were also, there's scientists out there that study coincidences.
Really? Wow.
Yes, and that was the summit. It's really interesting to look up. It's called the Scientific and Medical Network out of the UK. And the executive director, David Lorimer, invited me to be on their, it was the Synchronicity Summit. So I was the only non-academic, non-scientist. So basically, these scientists are catching up to us.
Finally. That's all I can say. Yay.
Yes. And so what was so interesting to me was, and also David Lorimer interviews every month. He has a book brief review. So he interviews a scientist and reviews their book. And so I was the person he interviewed for September.
Wow.
So it's like, and I'm like pulling back. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, these scientists need me as much as I need them. Okay, so my experiences sort of, they validate my experiences. Okay. Because they're scientists. So people like start to pay extra attention now because they're scientists. But my experiences validates their research.
Yes.
So it's a very symbiotic thing going on here. So, and what happened was, you're familiar with Dr. Eben Alexander?
No.
Oh, he wrote this book, Proof of Heaven. And so last year, I kicked off the speaker series here in Philadelphia at the Center for Contemporary Mysticism. And he was the last speaker. So I reached out to him and I said, look, we're the bookends to this speaker series. So would you like to read my book? And his assistant said, oh, he would love to read your book. And she is the one that turned me on to 2 scientists that study coincidences. So that was the initial thing. So I hear back that he loved the book. He loved the book. And would I send him the manuscript of my second book for him to endorse, which I did. Well, I get this message back and he says, I'm sorry, I can't endorse your book because there's not sufficient discussion of consciousness. Now, that is BS, okay, because you can't have these things happen without consciousness. But it was code, okay? That message was code. Like, look, I'm a neurosurgeon, Okay, I can almost die, go to heaven, come back and write about it. But I can't touch your subject because it's an NDE. You see, NDEs, near-death experiences, they've been studied by scientists for decades, but not your subject. So then I thought, well, I hadn't thought about asking people to endorse my book. So I reach out to Bernie Beitman, excuse me, who's one of these scientists that study coincidences, and asked if he would, I sent him the manuscript about him endorsing my book. And he writes back and he says, I'm sorry, I can't endorse your book because it's not my field. Well, okay, fine. 3 days later, so this David Lorimer from the Scientific and Medical Network sends me 2 articles that he co-wrote on after death communication. 3 days after I received these 2 articles, Bernie Beitman emails me and says, since I received your initial email, I have received a flurry of after-death communications information, and I will endorse your book. Now, granted, it's still not his field, right? But that was code. But now, just in time, synchronistically, in time for my book, we have a new field of study. It just emerged, and it's ADC, after-death communication. So now, I mean, people have been studying this, but not legally because it wasn't scientific. But now we have the acronym. So
acronym.
So I don't know how this all happened, but it's all bigger than me. Okay, writing the book is bigger, both books, bigger than me.
Wow. So curiosity, how do they study this? What is the technique or the technology that they use to study this field? That's so fascinating.
Well, I think mostly it's anecdotal.
Mm.
So, and in one of the articles, David Lorimer admonished materialistic scientists and said, look, in the place of mounting anecdotal evidence of after-death experiences, if you don't consider this, in spite the evidence, the anecdotal, similar stories, and just mounting stories, you're not a true scientist.
My dog is crying listening to you. I don't know why she's crying. She must be receiving something. She's very sensitive.
So that is one thing, because my book is these things that happen to me and being open to them, I guess. Some people report seeing apparitions. Now, thankfully, my departed loved ones know better than to appear to me because I would freak out. But they have such creative ways of communicating with me. But I have to tell you one story that was in one of David Lorimer's articles, which is an example of trying to prove this. Okay, so this, I don't know when it happened. For some reason, I think it was in the 1950s, but I think it's one of the most creative experiments I've ever heard. Okay, so I think it happened in Hungary. So there was this Hungarian psychologist, and he wanted to prove that mediumship is real. Okay, so that a medium can communicate with a spirit. So what he did is he got this world famous medium, and then he researched chess masters, okay, chess champions, dead ones. So he narrowed it down to 3. And then he got a live chess master. So he had the medium communicate with the chess masters and see if one would step up and actually play a game of chess with the live one. So one did, okay? One did. So they first they made sure that the medium did not know chess, so that there wouldn't be any, and it would just be an intercession.
Yeah.
So, but they taught him or her, chess moves and the lingo, so that he could be an intercessor. And so each of these chess masters has a particular style of playing. Okay, so the dead chess master at first he was a little rusty at his game, but then he got into it, and because these three people, the psychologist who ran the experiment, the medium, and the live chess master had to be together. So because they were in different countries, it took 7 years. This game took like 7 years. I don't know who won. It doesn't matter. But the dead chess master played exactly in the same style that he played while he was living. So I just found this like, who would think this up, So,
wow.
So this, I don't know. It's brand new, Royce. It's brand new. And, but when these experiments or whatever these scientists are going to do to prove all this, here's my book.
Wow. Well, like I said in the intro, it took me quite a while to really trust what I was getting. But eventually you just kind of, even now, one of my students, her mom passed a couple years ago, actually, and she started coming to me, and I'm thinking, why are you coming to me? And she would give me this information and I would share it with her daughter, and everything that I got was absolutely accurate. So it's that kind of thing that to me is indelible proof. It really is. And it's interesting to see that scientists are doing things like the chess game. I just love that. That's amazing. Yeah. So we need to take a little bit of a break and we will be right back. I'm talking to Sophia Demas, author extraordinaire, and partnering with science with all of her amazing miracles and coincidences. So we'll be right back.
Om Times TV. Do you crave joy but feel stuck? Do you go through life feeling constantly triggered and frustrated? Fear is likely the culprit, and subconscious fear is likely sabotaging you. Perfect Life Awakening is a time-tested, spiritually based approach to inner transformation created by Royce Morales. For over 40 years, she has helped people get to the origins of subconscious fears and ultimately help them find their true purpose and a life full of joy. Sign up for Perfect Life Awakening today at roycemorales.com. You deserve to go from triggered to empowered, shifting your life with Perfect Life Awakening. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows,
Okay. That was weird. It kind of just ended midstream. All right. We're again having technical, interesting things here. I think some spirits are messing with us. They're messing with my dog. She's crying. We hear little clicking sounds in the background. Very interesting. Anyway, so we're back, and I'm talking to Sophia Demas about her wonderful book. And I just have a bunch of questions. We were talking about proof and all of that. Tell us some of the stories that were proof for you that spirits exist and they're trying to reach us, and consciousness never dies. Give us a couple of examples that you've personally experienced about that.
Well, the communications have been well, okay. So as I said before, there's not all of these are after death communications. Some of these things happened. Like I was taking care of my mother. So I live in Philadelphia, but grew up in Portland, Oregon. So she was in Portland, and I went back home and took care of her. She was bedbound for 10 months until the moment she died. And there was also things that happened in the house, like, and I believe that all of these were true. So hospice would come in and I would tell them a story and they would say, oh yeah, we hear this all the time. So there was like one time, we're having coffee and she said, whose children are those? They're just so lovely. And I said, well, what children? These two children, they're just smiling and they're just so lovely. I wonder whose children they are. Well, I knew that they were angels. Okay. And then as time progressed, and one time she was looking out towards the door that went into the hallway, and we're talking. And all of a sudden she says, who are those men in those sandals? And I went, oh no, I hope there's no, I said, Mama, I said, there's nobody here. It's late at night. There's no one in that. Oh no, those men are there. They walked by and they wore sandals. So I feel like there was this process that was happening, and and I will tell the story because it's one of the two stories that I write about that it was something that forced me to do something I hadn't, that was not in my sphere, so that my mother could have her dying wish. So my when she was actively dying, and we had a caregiver that came on Tuesdays there, and my brother had gone into one bedroom to sleep, and I was absolutely dead tired. I mean, because this process had been happening all day, and at one point, when she had her eyes closed, I went to her, and everybody was taking a break. There's family members taking a break for lunch, and I took her hand and I said, Mama, I said, please have me in your prayers. I said, you're going to be in mine forever. And a tear came out, of her eye.
Wow.
So anyway, I was dead tired. I couldn't eat. I was taking a little sip of brandy every couple hours. And so it was very late, and I couldn't stay awake any longer. So I said to Dolores, I said, I've got to go to bed. And she said, look, I've seen what you've done for your mother. It's okay. So I said my goodbyes to her. She was not responding. And I said my goodbyes, and I kissed her, and I went up to bed. Shortly thereafter, I feel a slap in the back of my head. And I went, oh my God, my mother is going on the biggest trip of her life. And I can't be in bed. I have to be with her. So I just went downstairs and I said, Dolores, I'm going to be with her. And then I got another slap. And I went, oh, George, my brother. And I said, Dolores, wake him up and bring him in here. So he comes in there kind of half there. And I said, George, take her other hand. And and these words just came out. I honestly have no idea. I said, Mama, go towards the light, okay? Just go towards the light where all the angels are waiting for you, and Daddy is there with his hand outstretched.
Oh.
And just at that moment, she took her last breath, and
Wow.
she took direction, and that's what she wanted. She wanted us to be holding her hand. And I said to her, just like when we were little, we're holding your hand, just like when we were little. And she got her dying wish, which the urging came from somewhere else. And you know who it was? It was my father.
Oh, wow.
My father made sure that she got the send-off that she wanted. So how's this communicated? Okay, so this isn't really after-death communication, but it's something takes over. Like I said, there were so many things happening that hospice would confirm, and they were happening to other people. I've had, since then, I've had visitations from my mother. The first chapter of the second book, Consciousness Beyond Death, is about the communications with my father. And then the second chapter is my mother, which is communications with my mother. And one time, and I don't know if I even wrote this in the book, but one time I woke up in the morning and my mother is next to me in bed, and I could feel her. And I didn't want to look. Now, how weird is that, But it was freaky as it was, And I'm like, oh my God, she's here. Oh my God, she's here. And all of a sudden, she goes in Greek. She said, oh, I have to go. And she vanished. So, but then there's messages that, one is, it was through a medium in Lilydale. Do you know about Lilydale?
No.
Oh, Lilydale is this kind of spiritual community in upstate New York, and it's seasonal. It's, I think, May through August, and all these mediums converse, and then people come from all over to get messages from their departed loved ones. So I had no idea. Oh, and this is where the seances started in 1848. Okay, so that's where it was a spiritualism happened then, it started. So we were going to a wedding, my friend's daughter's wedding in Buffalo. So I was under a deadline. So I asked my husband, Frank, if he would get a place for us to stay, because there weren't any hotels available, because there was a Beyonce concert and a state fair. So the hotel rooms were taken. So he says, oh, I found a place. And he said, I booked it for 2 nights. And we were on our way to, we have our friends and neighbors across the street that have their own island in Maine, off the coast in Maine. So we would go every year. And so we were going to, from Buffalo, go to Maine. So he says, I booked this place for 2 nights. I went, what? 2 nights? Why? And he said, well, like little R&R. I said, but it eats into our vacation. What's in Buffalo? What do you do in Buffalo? And he goes, well, there's Lake Ontario or Erie or one of those lakes. And I said, I'm going to spend a day looking at a lake? And he said, well, I thought you would find the hosts interesting. And I went, oh, why? So he says, well, the woman is a Reiki master, and she does these Reiki things. And the husband is in broadcasting, and he's written a couple of books about broadcasting. And I thought, Reiki, well, maybe I could turn this into a spa day. Like, okay, maybe I will do a Reiki thing. So we get there, and she offered a meditation to do it. So we did a meditation. I said, fine, great. She says, but I have to be gone by 11 o'clock because I am doing a book signing in Lilydale. And I said, really? I said, what's Lilydale? And she said, well, it's a spiritual community. And then she said, no, first she said it's a gated community. And then she said it's a spiritual community. And I said, Frank, we can go to the book signing. Okay, so great. I thought this is great. So we get to Lilydale, and I'm telling you, Royce, it was so bizarre. It was like a stage set for like a Victorian movie, like little colored houses, different colored houses, Victorian cottages, and manicured lawns, and these people kind of walking around like with these smiles on their faces. On here, and so we go to the bookstore, and there's our host signing books, and she introduces me to the manager and tells the manager that I am writing this book. And she says, what's the subject? And I said, it's about the divine language of coincidence. And she says, well, that's right up our alley. She goes, we'll give you a book signing when you finish the book. And I went, that's why I'm here.
Wow.
That's why I'm here, to get this book signing. So then I said, well, what goes on here? And she shows me the catalog, and she goes, well, there's these mediums, and people come to get messages. And she says, it's Sunday today. Oh, on Sundays we have 2 message ceremonies, one at 2 and one at 7. And I went, what's that? She says, well, that's where everybody converges in the assembly hall, and these mediums give messages to people. I went, Frank, and he goes, yeah, we're going. Okay. So we had this lovely lunch on this big porch, Victorian porch, and then we go to the assembly hall, and there's like maybe 150, 200 people there. And I said, I want to sit in the back because I want to see the show. So I stood in the back, and they started giving these messages, and each medium would choose 2 people to give messages to. And it would go something like this. It would go like, first of all, will you receive? And of course, yes, because that's why they're there. And then she said, well, I see this man in overalls, and he tinkers with cars, and he's very jovial. And does that ring a bell? And they go, yeah, that's my Uncle Roy, And he goes, well, he has a message for you. And so then the message, and then they would say, does that make sense? And I would say maybe 98% of the people recognized the person and accepted the message. So towards the end, this medium points at me, and she goes, hey, you with the white hair and glasses. And I'm looking around, like half the people there had white hair and glasses. Then she says, you with the green headband. And it was me. Will you receive? And I said, I'm an open book. And she says, there are 2 men. One is your grandfather, and the other is your father. And it's your father who has a message for you. Now, my father was one of the most hysterical people you could ever meet. He was loving and wonderful and boisterous. And he was 5'1", but he acted like he was 6'5", and then we would have this, we would argue, and then he wouldn't speak to me for 5 days. And then he would go and tell his friends how awful I was. And I found that out after he had died from somebody. And so that didn't lay well with me, that he would do this. And I would find out about her. So she says, your father wants you to know that he knows that he has said some, what was the word? Inappropriate. He has said some inappropriate things. And he wants you to know that he's just full of love for you.
Mm.
Boom. Instantly, I was whole. Instantly. It was exactly what I needed. Then she says, he has a message for your nephew. Now, I have 2 nephews, and one I have particularly close with, John. And he said, she said, the message was, your father says he doesn't want him to find himself on the other side and be sorry for what he did on earth. Mm-hmm. And I instantly knew it was my other nephew, Nick, who has problems with addictions, big problems with addictions. So I just couldn't believe it. So right on our way to the island, I texted Nick and I said, I took the direction from the mediums. So I said, look, in very strange circumstances, there's a message for you from your papu, which is grandfather in Greek. But I don't want to text it. So, let me know if you want to talk. So immediately he goes, 7:00 your time. So I get on the phone and I told him the message. And then I said, again, taking direction from the mediums, I said, does that make sense to you? And there's this long pause. And he goes, oh yeah. And he tells me that his wife had taken the 3 children and left the house and lived in with her parents. And he was sitting there with a gun.
Oh, I've got chills. Wow.
So let people, proof. I mean, proof is in the pudding. It's like, do I need proof? I mean, these things just happened over and over. And also, and people could be wondering, well, I don't know, that doesn't happen to me. Well, maybe you're not paying attention. For example, my father would give me a nickel when I was little, and he would allow me to go, I like 5 years old, and he would allow me to go into this little neighborhood grocery store and buy a stick of gum, for a nickel. And I felt so adult, like being able to buy something myself. And these nickels started to appear after my father died. And they sometimes they were random, but there was more than a few times where I thought of him. Once it was on my birthday, and I was having lunch with a friend outside in it was like outdoor. And so my friend went inside to get a refill for coffee. And I thought of my father, and I just thought, I just would love to just know that you're there, and where you are. And I look down at my foot and there's a nickel. So, and these things happen. So I think being open to it is, one sort of a takeaway that I could, give out. That these things do happen, and they happen to many, many people. In fact, okay, one more little story here. This is my eye doctor. Okay, so I told my eye doctor about the book, and she says, well, I have a story for you. And I went, okay, bring it on. She said, well, I had to go to this gala with my husband, and I really didn't want to go. I mean, it was like I was dead tired. I just didn't want to go to this gala, but we had to go to the gala. So we go to the gala, and I had to take the babysitter home because my husband has this rule: never be alone with a babysitter, which I found interesting. And she says, I'm driving back, and all of a sudden, she said, I heard my grandmother go, "Wake up!" And she goes, I came to, and I was heading into a brick wall.
Oh, wow.
She had fallen asleep. And she
Wow.
said, I knew it was my grandmother because her voice would get high pitched when she was panicking.
Wow. So those stories are triggering a question that I have for you. And we only have a few more minutes. I want to get a few questions in. It seems to me, at least in my personal experience of having spirits come to me frequently, a lot of times they want to clean things up. They want to apologize, or they want to say, gosh, I'm really sorry that whatever. For example, I had my ex-husband, we had remained good friends even after our divorce, but he died about 7 years ago, and just in a weird way, very weird way, very unexpected. And I never heard from him after that, which is unusual because I usually at least get some kind of little spirit visitation. Never heard from him. I was sitting here at my desk, and all of a sudden, 7 years later, there he was. And he, touched my hair and let me know who he was. And I'm like, God, it took you so long. Why did it take you 7 years? And he said, well, I had a lot to learn. And I said, well, yeah, that's true. But he basically spent 10 minutes telling me how sorry he was, that he never appreciated me when we were married. And he had a few things to say to our son about apologizing to him. And he came back 3 days in a row, each time adding more to what he was apologizing for. Do you find that that happens a lot with spirits, that they bring this stuff with them and they have to do something with it? And, they look for somebody to hear them and to say, hey, it's okay, you're forgiven. Does that happen to you a lot too?
I gave you the example with my father through the medium, not directly, but
Yeah.
through the medium. I'm sorry, I did some inappropriate things, but
Yeah.
I have full love for you. So to me, that is, but that does happen a lot, that
Yeah.
they come to offer something so that the living is made whole. Because I have to ask you, didn't that make you feel good?
Oh, yes. I mean, I had forgiven him a long time ago. There was nothing for me to forgive, but
Exactly. Because
he
I mean,
needed to say,
they're in a great place. We're still on Earth, and so they give messages. They let. Oh, there's also something that I read about the phantom phone calls, that people get these phone calls, and I had my two roommates for a period of 3 years. We lived together, and there was this huge parlor at one of my roommates. It was her house, and there was this red phone in the parlor, and she received. There was a phone. The phone rang. She picked up the phone. It was static, and her father said, "Mickey, it's me." And he was the only person that called her Mickey. Her name was Michelle. And so, and that was that. And then my other roommate, the phone rang, she picked it up, and it was her grandfather. And I never got a call on the red phone, but they did. So it's in creative ways. And so really, when you think about consciousness, that we're all one, we are all one. And we're all one with not just the living, but also the departed. And what makes me feel great is knowing that, hey, when it's my time to go, I get to be creative and communicate with whoever I've left behind. So
yeah.
it's just nice to know.
Yeah. It's interesting that they use the phone. My ex-husband was he was an engineer, and his specialty was communication through phones. So I'm surprised that he never tried to communicate in that same method. I think that would have been kind of funny that, but he chose to just reach out instead. So that was
So he actually appeared to you.
no, well, spirit, like you were saying, I don't get, the people sitting in front of me. I get feelings, I get sensations, I hear words.
Yes.
But I have yet to actually see somebody show up like that because like you said, I don't think I would want to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and people have reported seeing the person and
Yeah.
and having a conversation, So it's a big wide world, and what's interesting, I'm going to be looking forward to what these scientists come up with.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, definitely. Wow. Shake up the world, Sophia. Yeah. So I have another question for you. I have an experience with a close relative who I know is my father reincarnated in her body. I've known this since the day she was born. She,
Whoa.
I know she would do things and I'd go, oh my God, that's exactly what my dad would have done. When she was this little tiny creature, she was sitting at the table and all of a sudden she said, she could barely talk. And all of a sudden she said, isn't this pleasant? And that's exactly what my dad used to say when we were sitting around at the table. And I would sit there and go, oh my gosh. So how do I believe in reincarnation, obviously, but I find that I would love to communicate with my dad through her. Have you ever experienced anything like that where you're like, I really want to, I know my dad is in that body. I'd like to talk to him. I don't do that. I feel like that's kind of an intrusion. And I feel kind of, I don't know, icky about that. So what are your thoughts about that?
I have no direct experience with reincarnation. One of my closest friends, though, when her daughter was 3, she told my friend that her name, which was a Hawaiian name,
Hmm.
and talked about the turtles in the water, and talked about the pineapples, and this place, described this place, and my friend, was egging it on. Oh, well, tell me more, and this has just been, chronicled. I mean, it's scientifically that, and because I believe, and there's also research on this, that children are born in spirit, okay, and they, I mean, there's been studies, psychologists talking to children, and when they're very little, they can talk about life issues like life, death,
Mm-hmm.
truth. They talk about this, and then what happens is life distractions get in the
Oh,
way,
yeah.
and they lose
Yes.
that. So you see a lot of reincarnation reports about little children.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, they're that much closer
So
to
that's
the
very
spirit.
interesting that
Yeah.
you saw that in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That happened with I have a friend who's a Tibetan Buddhist,
Mm.
and she gave me a reading once, and she started the reading by saying, your mother's figuring very, very strongly in this reading." And then I said, "Oh, good." And she said, "Your mother's here." And I went,
Yeah.
and she says, "And she wants you to keep putting one foot in front of the other."
Mm.
Royce, the only way this could have been weirder, because this was her sign off. After every phone call, when I would come back to Philadelphia, she would say goodbye, and then she says, "Just remember, keep putting one foot in front of the
Wow.
other." The only way it would have been weirder is if my friend said it in Greek.
Yeah.
It
Wow.
was just so. So yes, this happens from all directions.
Yeah. So we have like 1 minute left. What is the final thing you would like people to take away from this, as well as give the name of your book and how to reach you?
Well, it's. I think it. My message is one of hope. Okay,
Yeah.
that thinking that when you die, your brain dies is just not it's not the truth. It's like we remain as conscious as we are right this minute.
Yes.
And so the first book is The Divine Language of Coincidence, and the second book that 7 out of the 10 chapters are my experiences, and 3 are of friends. And I can't pick which one's stranger, and that is the consciousness beyond death. And my website is sophiademas.com, where you can find out more.
Great. Thank you so much. What an honor to listen to your stories, and keep up the good work. And scientists, if you're listening to this, do some research and know what us metaphysicians have known all along, that consciousness is forever and deserve to have your words, both in spirit as well as in a body, received and heard and spoken. Thank you so much. And
Thank
everybody
you.
have a
Thank
great
you.
Thanksgiving. Thank you.